In economics class today, we shall be looking at consumer theory 2. The last time we looked at theory 1, where we explained utility. Coming down to the concept of utility, then we finalize that one by looking at the law of diminishing return as well as the consumer equilibrium. But here, we want to look at indifferent curve, budget line, as well as the equilibrium under this area. Because here, we'll be looking at two commodities. But the previous one will emphasize only on one commodity. So when we are talking about two commodities, then consumer will be having preference in this situation, maybe consuming more or dropping the other one. But two commodities will be consumed at a time, where consumer will prefer more to the other one. Indifferent curve. This indicates the various combination of two commodities which yield equal satisfaction to the consumer. Let's demonstrate the diagram below. In this analysis, we have two commodities that consumer want to take at the same time. Now, this is good X axis and good Y axis. Consumer is trying to combine the two goods together in order to get satisfaction. Now, if consumer decides to go for 12 units of commodity X, it implies that a desire to have 1 unit of commodity Y. Let us assume again that consumer wants to increase the consumption of good Y to 2. It implies that he has to decrease the quantity of good X to 8. Now, he still wants more of good Y. Let's assume to 3 units. He has to reduce the consumption of good X to 5. Now, he still wants to take more of good Y. Let's say 4 units. He has to reduce the consumption of good X to 3. Now, when we combine them together, we have this curve that we call IC, which implies indifferent curve. That by this curve, consumer is having equal satisfaction irrespective of the point. That is, the satisfaction here, let's say point A is equal to the one here, point B is equal to the one here, point C, and is equal to the one here, point D. That is what we call indifferent curve. Irrespective of any point, consumer will have the same, or that is, it will yield equal satisfaction having consumed or consuming the two commodities. Indifferent map. This is a graph showing a whole set of indifferent curves. Each successive curve further from the original curve indicates a higher level of total satisfaction. This is indifferent curve, this under indifferent curve, this under indifferent curve. Combination for all these curves lead to what we call indifferent map. And what are we trying to understand in indifferent map is that we are looking at the level of satisfaction that a consumer will derive from consumption of two commodities. Now, we have commodity X and commodity Y. The indifferent curve 1, indifferent curve 2, it implies that indifferent curve 2 is higher than indifferent curve 1. So consumer want to move to the higher level of consumption of commodities. Now, the next indifferent curve, which is an indifferent curve 3, indicates higher level than the one of indifferent curve 2. Indifferent curve 3 is the highest level of satisfaction that consumer will want to go for. Budget line. This is the various combinations of two goods which can be bought with a given money income and assumed prices of goods. It is also known as price line. In budget line, we are talking about income of the consumer and prices of commodities. To be precise, two commodities. For instance, income of a consumer equals $8 per week. Goods X price equal $2. Good Y price equal $1. The question now is, how many quantity of goods will a consumer buy if the price of good X is $2 without buying commodity Y? How many quantity will the consumer buy? Or if consumer decide to buy commodity Y only without buying commodity X, how many quantity of commodity Y will he buy? Looking at the table, we are saying if the price of commodity X is $2 and the price of commodity Y is $1, what is going to be the quantity of X if the consumer is not buying commodity Y? It's going to be what? 4 quantity, because 4 times 2 is 8, which is $8 to be the income of the consumer. Now, if the consumer want to get commodity Y as well as commodity X, that is a combination of 2 commodities, in order to get equal satisfaction, it implies that the consumer will drop quantity of X for quantity of Y. So by the time we multiply 3 by 2, we have 6 to be $6. And $1 times 2, quantity of Y will be $2. So at the end, we have the total income to be $8. Now, so what we are trying to understand here is that consumer want to consume 2 commodities at a time that will give equal satisfaction. So if consumer can give up quantity Y in order to buy quantity Y, then each quantity of Y will be purchased. Because consumer want to take the 2 commodities, then this one needs to come down to 6 in order to take one of these. Because consumer want to take more of X, he has to drop quantity of Y. The more the consumer want to take more of X again, he has to drop quantity of Y. But assuming that consumer just wants only good X without good Y, it means he will go for 4 quantity of good X. Now, let's look at the diagram, the curve that we have below the table. Looking at this axis, which is a commodity X axis, that is good X. Looking at the horizontal one, we have good Y to the left. Now, when consumer went for 4 units of commodity X, there is nothing like a consumption of commodity Y. This is good Y. Because consumer wants to take commodity Y, he has to drop more of commodity X, that is coming to 3 units of commodity X in order to take 2 units of commodity Y. Consumers still want to take more of commodity Y by taking 4 units. So taking 4 units, it implies that he has to drop commodity X, going for 2 units, that is ignoring, that is giving up 2 units in order to consume 4 units of Y. Consumer still want to go further, taking more quantity of commodity Y. He has to drop more of commodity X. So at the end, we are going to have what we call budget line. So this is what we call budget line. It's the budget line curve. Looking at the diagram before us, you can observe that we have indifferent map, where we have indifferent of 1, indifferent of 2, indifferent of 3. We can also see our budget line within that area. Now we have good X, we have good Y. You observe that indifferent curve touches the budget line, and it's telling us that at that point we can see consumer equilibrium. That is a point where consumer is able to have the attainable indifferent curve as well as the price that he is willing to pay for the 2 commodities. Now, let's look at it again. These are our budget line. We can see indifferent curve 1 here. We can see indifferent curve 3 here. Right? But we have said that indifferent curve 2 is higher level of satisfaction. But indifferent curve 3 is another higher level of satisfaction, that is higher than the indifferent curve 2. Why indifferent curve 2 is what is higher than indifferent curve 1. But when we look at the budget line, it touches indifferent curve 2. Why? Because of the income of the consumer as well as the fixed prices of the two commodities. So consumer cannot attain this because the income cannot, or the prices cannot allow the consumer to attain it. So where the consumer can have the word equilibrium is where the marginal, the indifferent curve touches the budget line. The question now is, what is consumer equilibrium? This is the point where the price line that we call budget line is touching the highest attainable indifferent curve. So this is the highest attainable indifferent curve that consumer can have as a result of the budget line. What is consumer surplus? This is the difference between the maximum amount a consumer is willing to pay for the good and the price he actually pays for the goods. Take for instance, assuming the consumer is willing to pay 20 naira for a commodity, 20 naira for one quantity, right? And the seller is willing to sell it 10 naira. So it implies that consumer has gained 10 naira difference. He intends to pay 20 naira, but he actually pays 10 naira. So the surplus is 10 naira. Assuming the commodity is 2 quantity, where consumer is willing to pay 15 naira per unit, right? So for 2 units, it will be 30 naira. So if consumer is asked to pay 10 naira, then consumer has gained extra 5 naira on 1 unit. So it implies that for 2 units, consumer gains 10 naira. Now assuming that he wants to get 3 units of the commodity, and is willing to pay 10 naira, where what the seller is willing to ask him to pay is 10 naira. So there is no consumer surplus at Q3. But from Q1 to Q2, consumer has gained surplus. But Q3, there is no surplus. So when we are talking about consumer surplus, then we are looking at the amount he has desired to pay for the commodity. Likewise, looking at the actual amount he pays. So it's like when you assume that, okay, the price of this commodity in the market is going to be 15 naira, and get to the market, the seller asks you to pay 14 naira. The next thing that will come out of your mouth is thank you. So that thank you refers to consumer surplus, that is the gain of 10 naira. Examples. Question 1. At every point on an indifferent curve, the A. Total utility is decreasing. B. Prices of all goods are constant. C. Level of utility is increasing. D. Level of utility is constant. The right answer is D. Level of utility is constant. Use the diagram below to answer question 2 and 3. Question 2. The consumer is at equilibrium at point A, N, B, P, C, M, D, K. The right answer is point K, which is letter D. Question 3. To move from point M to K, the consumer has to increase the A. Consumption of X and reduce the consumption of Y. B. Expenditure on Y. C. Expenditure on X. D. Consumption of Y and reduce the consumption of X. The right answer is letter D. Consumer has to increase the consumption of Y and reduce the consumption of